A forest can be a serene destination for us to reconnect with nature. A camping trip with your friends into the wilderness can be a very freeing experience. But as the sun falls, the feeling of safety and serenity falls with it. A dark, foreboding atmosphere is presented before you, complete with distorted movements in the shadows cast by the trees. A sense of loneliness and isolation, even amongst your companions. As you gather around your campfire with your friends, you somehow feel like you're not alone. Everyone is there, but it feels like something is very wrong. As you count the number of friends along for the trip, you notice another amongst your group. As you gather everyone closely around the fire, you notice that the number is fewer than it was before. As you close your eyes and prepare for sleep, a low noise can be heard from the previously silent forest. You are not alone. But are you ever truly alone while in the forest at night? The internet has become the ideal location for the spreading of campfire stories. It's something I've talked about a lot on this channel already. As long as there have been stories to tell, we love to give them life. Telling stories is what makes us all human at the end of the day. After all, who doesn't love a good story? The internet has made it easier than ever to spread our stories. Today's story didn't start as an internet tale though. Well, it did, but it's based partially on reality. Based in a world that we can never truly understand. A world that hides more secrets and mysteries than we'll ever experience in a lifetime. It's a story based on folklore and culture that supersedes us. Today we'll be retelling and analyzing Anansi's Goatman story. A truly terrifying modern cryptid tale. Anansi's Goatman story is a story that was brought to us from a place that always brings the most horrifying stories the internet has to tell. It comes from 4chan in a thread from 2012. The story was posted to 4chan's X Paranormal board. From there it would spread to other parts of the internet, before being cemented as a creepypasta. It was posted to the creepypasta wiki, creepypasta.com, and even narrated by several horror narrators on YouTube. The spread was slow, but this story had a real grasp on all that read it. Anansi's Goatman story starts with the narrator introducing himself, and is actually presented as a green text story at first. They say they are 16 and have a family down in Alabama. His uncle owns a farm with a large amount of land in Huntsville. On his property are a bunch of trailers littered throughout the woods that he uses for hunting and camping. The narrator and a few of his cousins decide to go camping in the woods for a few nights. They bring all the supplies they need, which includes food and some camping equipment. Since they'll be staying in the trailer, they don't bring tents or anything. They arrive at the camping ground and something immediately feels off. The air has this sort of electric smell permeating through it. Without another thought to it, they begin to unpack everything and they decide to head down to the creek to swim for a few hours. Before they can go, an older man and his son come out of the woods. The older man is holding a shotgun and says hello to the teens before asking what they're doing so deep in the woods. The narrator then explains who his uncle is and that they are just camping out for a few nights. The older man knows his uncle and says that they need to be careful as there was a big animal sighted in the woods recently. His son then asks if he can hang out with the narrator as they are around the same age. He gets the go-ahead and joins his group. The narrator continues by stating everyone that is with the group. There were 6 boys and 5 girls, making a total of 11 teens. Of the 11 teens, the narrator only really knew his 5 cousins. Tanner, the kid that just joined their group, and the other 5 he didn't know really. The group of teens spend their day just hanging out in the woods, trying to get to know each other better. Tanner says that he is going home to ask his dad if he can stay out and camp with them. The narrator's cousin Rooster and one of the girls tags along with them as the sun is starting to go down. It's 7 p.m. when the group grabs their flashlights and starts walking the trail towards Tanner's property. 30 or 40 minutes pass by and the electrical smell from before pervades the air again. The smell was so strong that this time they could smell it over the campfire. It was described as smelling kind of coppery, like after you've had a nosebleed and it stopped bleeding. A nasty metallic back of your throat kind of smell. After searching the trailer to see if something was giving off that odor, they hear people booking it down the path toward them. Tanner, Rooster, and the girl are all running full speed toward the group. They run past the fire and into the trailer, which makes everyone else get up and run inside too. With the fire dying, one of the narrator's cousins says he'll get the generator going, but is stopped by Tanner, who was crying up until this point. He tells them to lock the front door and that no one can go outside. The other 2 that were with him were also crying. According to Tanner, he got the approval of his dad to go camping with them, but was told to bring the hunting rifle with him. He and his dad had seen something in their yard the other day that put them off. One of their pigs had been ripped up and half eaten. No animal that they know of does that sort of thing. Tanner packed his stuff, decided not to take the rifle, and the group left to go back to the campsite. While they're walking the trail, the girl says she hears something in the woods. The group turns their flashlights to see a tall person standing in a clearing. The person is facing away from them, and when they shout at them that they're scaring their friends, it doesn't even turn around. That's when they decide to start walking away. They see another person standing on the opposite side of the trail, also facing away from them. This time they decide they need to move a little faster. This is when they start smelling that coppery smell again. As they're relaying their story, the copper smell starts to linger in the trailer now too. A low guttural gibbering sound can be heard on either side of the woods now. The girl moved her flashlight toward the trees on the side of them and saw something with a jerky movement heading in the same direction as them through the woods. When the campfire came into view, something had moved onto the trail only 40 yards behind them. This is when they started running full speed toward the trailer. The narrator and his friends are trapped in the woods with what they assume to be crazy woods people or someone just trying to mess with them. They can't go outside and they don't really have a way of protecting themselves. That's when one of the narrator's cousins, Junior, starts telling a story he'd heard from a Native American kid he went to school with. The story was about a creature known as the Goatman. Everyone tells him to shut up as they don't need to put everyone else even more on edge. Junior continues talking about the Goatman anyway. He starts muttering that they are in his woods and that the Goatman will not leave any of them alive. The narrator doesn't believe any of this at the time, but of course in retrospect, he recalls his Menominee roommate telling him the story of the Goatman, a Wendigo-like creature with a human body and the head of a goat with the ability to shapeshift. Similar to the Wendigo, you're not supposed to talk about it or even bring up its name. This can be considered bad luck at best and dire at worst. As the group is huddled in the trailer, the smell suddenly disappears. Not like it dissipated, no, it was just there one minute and gone the next. Another hour passes before everyone feels safe enough to go outside and stoke the fire again. Everyone is too scared to go home though, as they'd have to go through the woods, so everyone stays in the trailer that night. The group experiences nothing else creepy that night and decides to stay another night. At around 1 a.m., while everyone is getting drunk and telling ghost stories, the smell comes back in full force. It was so bad this time that one girl vomited. The air feels clammy and something just doesn't feel right to the narrator. Everyone rushes back into the camper and huddles together. Junior starts with his story of the Goatman again, but is told to shut up by Rooster. The narrator, seeing everyone is on edge, decides to cook brats for everyone, cooking the 3 packages of 4 so that everyone can get at least one. After they were done, he handed them out to everyone. One of the narrator's cousins gets up to grab another brat and sees that they're all gone. He starts to blame the narrator for getting 2 while everyone else got 1. He said that was impossible because he gave everyone 1, including himself. Considering there were only 11 people in the camper, there should be 1 more brat left on the stove. That's when a girl starts screaming, "Get it out," she says. The narrator notices what's wrong and they all run out of the cabin. Once outside, they count everyone there. 11 people are now standing outside, but they swore that there were 12 inside the camper. Somehow they both had counted the exact same number in the cabin, 12. Now outside, only 11. They thought back to who it might be. They actually didn't all know each other that well. They were also worried about not going outside. They hadn't thought about it getting in with them. The girl that screamed, her name was Kira. She explained that while they were sitting in the camper, someone sitting next to her had reached out and gripped her leg pretty hard. They then proceeded to whisper something that she wasn't able to make out. That's when she screamed, as she was pretty sure it was the Goatman. In the morning, the group had a fractured decision. Some of the group wanted to leave, while the others didn't really think the Goatman was real and wanted to stay one more night. The narrator ends up having to stay as he has the keys to his uncle's camper. So 5 people, including Tanner, who went home to grab his gun, left that day, leaving only 7 behind in the woods. Around 4 p.m., everyone left the cabin, and by 5, Tanner still wasn't back yet. The group was starting to get worried, but something caught their eye. Standing by the fire was Kira, but with her back turned to everyone. She was part of the group that decided to leave earlier, so why would she come back? One of the remaining girls went outside and called for her. There was no response, and that's when the narrator notices the smell from before. It was faint, but unmistakably the same, though it wasn't as suffocating as it was before. The narrator pulled the girl back into the cabin and shut the door. Kira, or whatever was standing there, never moved or looked in their direction. She continued to stare toward the woods with her back turned to them. The rest of the group thought it was just a prank by the narrator. They didn't believe the Goatman stuff. If they did, they wouldn't still be hanging out in the woods like this. He reassures them that this isn't his doing and he's just as confused as everyone else. After a little convincing, they finally believe him enough to set up someone to watch Kira to see if she does anything. They close all the blinds except for one and have someone watch Kira. This goes on for 20 minutes with the girl just standing there and not moving at all. The guy that had been watching her is about to tell them that she still hasn't moved when a loud bang on the door scares everyone. They back away from the door. A second later, they hear Tanner screaming to be let in. The narrator rushes over to do so, and he stumbles inside with his gun in tow. There is no one outside now, not by the fire or anywhere. Tanner recounts what happens, and here's an excerpt from the story. Evidently, he had walked up to the campsite. Nothing weird happened in the forest, but he had seen a girl. Mind you, he said it was not Kira standing there. When he had gotten to the edge of the clearing, she had turned toward him with a slack-jawed look and just stared him down, slowly tracking him as he walked around the outside of the clearing towards the camp. He said it wasn't until he was almost halfway to the trailer he had realized that she was getting closer to him. She had started off by the fire, and without him even seeing her move, she had been turning, inching closer. He said he just ran the rest of the way back to the cabin thinking it would open, and when he got to the door and it was locked, he turned and there she was, about half the distance to the door. Tanner pulled the narrator aside with a pale look and says that there are only 7 of them in the camper now. When asked, the others all said there were 8, but now they all only counted 7. Somehow it had gotten in again and slipped out without being noticed. Tanner told everyone that his cousin would be coming down in a few hours and would be staying with them. His cousin would take them home in his truck in the morning. This eased the minds of a few of the remaining teens. One of the girls then starts an argument with the narrator, saying that he probably is just trying to scare everyone. Tensions were only getting higher in the camper, but they couldn't walk through the woods as the sun was just starting to go down. They had a gun, some food, and a radio. They all just needed to calm down a bit and wait it out. After not finding anything on the radio to listen to, they see a man walk up to the camper. Tanner confirms that it's his cousin, and they let him in. He was 19, so a little older than everyone else, and also brought his own gun. Tanner's cousin looked around the camper and seems confused. He asks everyone where their little buddy is, and if they've been cooking blood or something, because it smells like it all the way up the trail. A collective nope comes from the group, and Tanner's cousin goes on to explain. Here's another excerpt. He had come down the same trail Tan had been using, and he had come up on one of Yu's guys' buddies, standing in the middle of the trail, looking at him slack-jawed. He had asked her a bunch of questions, but all she did was just look at him. Then she smiled at him, and he said he kept walking. She couldn't keep up with him and kept lagging a little behind. He said he kept asking her if she was hurt or something and if she needed any help, but she had continued to stare. Eventually, he had been walking and turned around a bend in the trail, but when he turned around and went back to see if she was okay, the trail was empty. He'd assumed she had taken some shortcut through the woods to our trailer. The narrator's group explains everything that had happened to them throughout the last few days. He doesn't expect Tanner's cousin to believe them, but he just listens. A few silent moments later, Tanner's cousin continues his story. He says when she had kept trying to lag behind him, it had kind of weirded him out. So he tried to keep her in front of him, but no matter how slow he walked, she was always lagging a little behind, and that he smelled this nasty smell, and it got stronger as he got to the camp. Eventually it got really strong. She had said something really low that he didn't catch, and when he had turned around, she had been right up on him, and he stepped back from her. It was at this point he asked her if she was okay, and if she wasn't, if she wanted him to carry her back the rest of the way, but she just kept staring. He said he'd reached out for her, as in to grab one of her shoulders. But he must have misjudged the distance because she was off to the side of where he had put his hand, like she had moved while he was looking dead at her. The group decided to just sit around the cabin and eat some more food. Around 11, the smell returns in full force, but smells absolutely disgusting. It smells like cooking blood and burnt hair to the max. This leads to Tanner and his cousin Reese grabbing their rifles. A half-knocking, half-clawing is then heard at the door. This time it was followed by the most uncanny-sounding voice. It sounded like an animal that learned how to speak. It kept saying, "Let me in, and stop playing around." The voice definitely didn't belong to a human. The voice didn't have the right cadence that a person does. The voice continued demanding to be let in, with the most ungodly sounds imaginable. This went on for 15 minutes. Everyone was just frozen in fear. Even the armed ones were shaking as they held their guns to the door. The smell goes away finally, and whatever was at the door slinks off into the woods. For the next hour, the creature can be heard walking through the woods nearby and occasionally coming back to the door to say something, and then going back to the woods again. Around 2 a.m., the smell finally fades away, and Reese decides he's tired of this and runs outside with his rifle. He fires a few shots into the woods, telling the creature to go away. This doesn't help, as a loud gibbering and hooting can be heard from the river across from the trail. Then the creature starts screaming. The scream was so foul, and it sounded like a woman and a cat screaming together. A rustle could be seen from the bush not too far from the camper. Reese shoots another shot into the tree line, then backs up into the camper. Once inside, Reese mentions that something had been crawling out of the bushes super low to the ground and that he had shot at it. The next 2 hours were filled with the screams of the creature, the sound of it moving from the campsite to the tree line, and crying. The creature seemed to finally leave, as everyone was starting to fall asleep. Everyone, that is, except for Tanner. Tanner stayed awake and held his gun tightly. Here's an excerpt from the ending of the story. Tanner had been sitting in the chair, watching the door with his rifle. Nobody else heard or saw this, and he told me 2 days later after the whole thing was over. He said he had been nodding off after the screaming and noises finally stopped. And he had been almost asleep when he saw someone come out of the bathroom and then lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep. He just assumed it was one of us, and he had nodded off. Then he said he kind of realized something was wrong, and while pretending to be asleep, he counted us. There were 9 people in the cabin. He basically didn't want to try to shoot the thing in the cabin and have it kill us all then and there, or have Reese wake up and start shooting and then we kill ourselves. So we just stayed awake all night, pretending to be asleep. He said sometimes it would stand up and kind of do this weird jittery thing or heave like it was laughing, but then it would lay back down. The story closes pretty weak because from my perspective, nothing happened. We woke up and I noticed that Tan was a little jittery and that he was avoiding looking at all of us. But we ate some breakfast, packed up, and started walking to his house. He stayed last in the cabin and said he'd lock up and bring me my uncle's keys to just start walking and he'd catch up, which I really didn't want to do. We got a little bit up the path, and when he came running, basically we just jogged back to his house. His cousin took us home. There was a window in the bathroom. Tan had gone back to lock up and looked in there. We were too stupid to lock a screenless window. The window was up when he went in there. I'm guessing it had been doing that all along, waiting for us to fall asleep or slip up and then getting in among us. It walked with us all the way back to his house, and then he said it lagged to the back of the group and looked him dead in the eyes before walking into the woods. This is Anansi's Goatman story, and is a horrifying retelling of a Monster Among Us tale. Basically, from start to finish, you're not sure what's going to happen to this group of teens. Considering the person telling the story is able to do so, that means that he at least lived to tell the tale. The story captivated everyone that heard it. It's not a traditional creepypasta actually, it has a basis in something else entirely. But the way it was presented and spread makes it very much like an internet campfire tale that we love to read and tell. I say that it's not really an internet tale mainly because the Goatman is an actual cryptid believed to exist. The Goatman mythology goes back pretty far. Satyr and other creatures come to mind, but this version of the Goatman was very much an American mythology. The earliest mention of a Goatman comes from the Native American tales of the Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers have become a very popular topic across the entirety of the internet, so much so that there are entire subreddits, websites, and groups dedicated to cataloging sightings, spreading stories, and creating artwork around them. They've even become pretty popular on TikTok. Skinwalkers can take on many forms, but are mainly known to be a cross between a human and an animal of some kind. The animals included are usually coyotes, wolves, bears, crows, and goats. The first Skinwalker legend has kind of been lost to time, but the most dominant history of the creature can be traced to Navajo legends. The actual full legend of Skinwalkers remains with the Navajo culture, as it alone is taboo to talk about them, especially with outsiders. Skinwalker legends aren't the only form of Goatman cryptids though. There also exists a Goatman cryptid known as the Pope-Lick monster from the 1950s. This monster is part man, part goat, and part sheep. The creature was first sighted and is suspected to live beneath a railroad trestle bridge over Pope-Lick Creek in Louisville, Kentucky, which is where it gets its name. The legend of the creature varies heavily. Some say the creature uses hypnosis to lure its victims onto the railroad tracks so they can get hit by trains. Others say that it jumps on vehicles driving by the bridge. Even more still claim that it uses an axe to attack any trespassers on the land. The Pope-like monster's origins aren't specifically known, and its method of terrorizing are heavily debated. The first is that the creature was some kind of human-goat hybrid that was part of a circus before vowing revenge for mistreatment. Another says it was a farmer that sacrifices goats to Satan for demonic powers. The Goatman has another set of sightings specifically in parts of Louisiana, Maryland, and Texas. This Goatman is a half-human and half-goat hybrid. It's known for attacking people who enter its territory and killing pets. This Goatman story has it as more of a burly beast, and not someone who is able to mimic human speech like in the story. The Goatman may have a few urban legends attached to it, but the one that is most prevalent in this story comes from the Menominee myth of the Goatman. The Goatman here has many of the same abilities as the Skinwalker: human mimicry, shapeshifting, and moving with incredible speed. The main difference and what makes this creature more terrifying is that it actually has no connection to humanity. Skinwalkers in most tales were human once, before being corrupted by dark witchcraft. This differs heavily from the Goatman, which is more of an evil spirit akin to the Wendigo. The Goatman does many of the things that we saw in this story. The smell of burning blood, the gibbering in the woods, and adopting a human form to slip into groups and sow chaos. Every box was ticked in the story for what a Goatman sighting would contain. This altogether has made Anansi's Goatman story one of the most interesting reads online. Another story from the depths of 4chan that will likely keep resurfacing as long as the internet needs horror stories. This was a glimpse into the disturbing world of cryptids beyond our understanding. A good internet horror story really just needs a captivating premise to be interesting. The most interesting part of the story wasn't blood, gore, or violence. It was the unknowable nature of the Goatman. Even by the end of the story, we, the reader, had no idea what the goals of the Goatman were. This story has a small grounding in reality and an urban legend based in it. This story could very well be something that we all gather around a campfire to tell. Hopefully, when you look up from the flickering flames, you won't see another person sitting within your group. Thank you everyone for watching this video. I have a soft spot for cryptids and cryptid stories. I spent a lot of time as a kid researching anything I could get my hands on about the myths, legends, and folklore around cryptids of our world. The internet has created so many new cryptids for us as well. With the advent of the Rake, Slenderman, and Siren Head, sometimes it's nice to look into cryptids that aren't based online though. Thank you to my Patreon supporters, Blow a Nose, Nora Kingsley, Scout with a Name, and Alex Hilton. You all help this channel continue to put out content each month. Thank you to everyone who watches this channel. I hope you all have a good night.